and conflict through film and music, the militarization of legal systems, the ways in which people imagine law and its possibilities as strategies of resistance. These are all significant issues to discuss, and we hope to continue engaging in these critical conversations across the future. And I think with those words, we open the floor to our first panelist.
Hi, can you still hear us? She couldn't hear us there. So our first presenter on this panel is the panel titled History, Identity, Community. Our first panelist is Syed Mujtaba from Goldsmiths. And the title of his paper is Creative Expression and Cultural Entrepreneurship in Kashmir. Thanks, Syed, for participating.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me.
I can hear.
Yes.
All right, good. It feels kind of strange holding a mic. I figured out today that my mic is not working, so I'm holding one. It almost makes me want to sing, but obviously you don't want to listen to me sing. But we are in different time zones. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to those in respective time zones. My name is Mujtaba, and I join you today from Goldsmiths, University of London. And it is my pleasure and honor to speak amongst such distinguished people. As mentioned, I have proposed to engage with the idea of creative expression and cultural entrepreneurship in Kashmir. However, I'm not here to read a formal academic paper and tell you about my research findings and validate the credibility. I'm here to try and leave you with a reason to work more collaboratively, a more interdisciplinary approach to the fresh engagement that this conference proposes to achieve. And with consideration to the time limit, and since I do not like to speak on behalf of other people, I will try and exemplify using my own work experiences and practices in order to try and direct you towards the larger discussion. I will try and speak about our limited engagement with creativity in general and arts in particular. I will then try and speak about the nature or function of creative education, a bit about my personal work, some ideas that motivate and drive my work, and then a bit about my organization, Kashmir Art Quest, in the context of cultural entrepreneurship in Kashmir. Now, I have been making art from an early age, and I've had several solo and group shows in various cities. I had my first public show in 2004 when I was in school. And then my role as an arts promoter developed later in 2009 when I was in an engineering college in Mumbai. I have been asked to write or speak about arts in Kashmir or about my own practices as an artist by various publications, and I've been interviewed about this several times. But irrespective of what I have to say, my response is almost always published with this overt voice of victimization, and mostly featured in the context of the turmoil in Kashmir, something merely to feel pity about, and which I think is therefore overlooking a larger discussion. But I do wish to emphasize that I do not imply that it is bad or cliche to write about the curbs on freedom of expression, because free speech is the heart and soul of creative expression and human flourishment. However, I think we are dealing with this issue within a very narrow perspective, which in turn undermines the vast exploration and implications of creativity. What kind of questions are we overlooking? Is it just that the free creative expression is being suppressed, which results in a lesser production of art, or does it affect the progressive function of society in any way? Is the product of creative expression merely a piece of decoration and adornment, or does it contribute towards the development of anything else? What is the conceptual value of art? What is the social value of art? And how does it collaborate with other fields? Why do we need artists, and why do we need art education, and why is it important in a conflict zone like Kashmir? Now let me elaborate a bit around the function of art education and art itself. I think art, like intelligence, is complex and dynamic. It is interactive. It is a creative process that comes about by interdisciplinary way of seeing things. To be creative, it is important to be curious. It is important to be prepared to be wrong. Curiosity, I think, is the engine of achievement, and being able to challenge is the fuel for the engine. The state of arts in a society strongly influences and drives its intellectual, cultural, and aesthetic evolution. Art education, I think, is therefore vital. In the words of English author and speaker and advisor on education, Ken Robinson, arts speak to parts of children's being which are otherwise untouched. He further emphasizes how human communities depend on our diversity of talent rather than a singular and linear conception of ability on which the global educational model is based. In a society like ours, especially in Kashmir, schools are places where teachers try to transfer what they know into the brains of students in the classroom, asserting a strict, narrowed down structure and to manufacture brains to supply for the existing industries. Teachers may be teaching, but the students may not necessarily be involved in the process of learning. Without engagement, there is no education. Our schools do not follow a culture of creativity, rather a culture of compliance. We stigmatize mistakes, and as I said in the words of Ken Robinson, we educate our children out of creativity. We follow a manufacturing model of education, a fast food model, which is unhealthy for our possibilities and capabilities, just like fast food is for our physical health, making us obese and lazy. Now let me tell you a bit about my idea of creative expression. Like most artists, I do not like the label of ism, even though recently I've found the eagerness to align my work with the idea of conceptual art. I think that's the influence that Goldsmiths has had on me. But I believe that the idea itself is the work, an idea that creates or paves way for a discussion, a discourse, an idea that is uncomfortable, challenging, shocking, or provocative, that pushes us to think and see beyond preconception. An idea that may sometimes evoke a personal experience or liberate from experience itself, an idea that exposes our vulnerability. I think the interaction with the work and reaction of the audience becomes a part of the artwork. The artist and his works are catalysts. Like, I try to choose my materials carefully. I try to conceptualize everything about the work, the size, the frame, no frame, its position on the wall, how to hang it, where to hang it, what kind of lights around it. But all this not to represent the idea, but to create that catalyst which evolves into the idea, into the discussion, the reaction. And then there are these common conceptions like an artist is ahead of his time and people will understand his work sometime in the future. Or there's this common quote like, no artist is ahead of his time, he is with time. It is just that others are behind the time. I think such notions of art are unreasonable. I believe an artist and his work are most important in its contemporary times, that direct thinkers and doers towards a future best suited for everyone. It is the expression of the people of its times. It tells us about the need for today so that we can evolve together and supply for the need tomorrow. Now I might sound a bit abstract here, but allow me to say this. Throughout centuries, there has been a man or an invader or a regime that has gained the courage and authority to rise and control, justly or oppressively.
Sorry. No, go ahead. We just wanted to tell you that 5 more minutes. Go ahead.
Sure.
But you have 5 more minutes.
As I was saying, such power abusing regimes will keep rising from time to time. If you're under occupation, you're not doing enough to claim your rights. You're not making enough sacrifice, physical, social, or intellectual. You're weaker than your oppressor, and he probably even knows it. But at the same time, I believe in the idea of claiming pride in your heritage, in your culture and traditions, in your history and roots. I love the sense of identity and the sense of belonging to a nation or a society. Nationalism may not necessarily do that, but hollow patriotism makes it stupid. I believe that the survival of the fittest is an uncivilized, outdated idea of social evolution. We innovate, create, and produce to supply for human needs. Sometimes we create this need, but we eventually supply to make our lives better and more interesting. Now, since there's this this time limit, let me jump straight to the context of arts and Kashmir. Kashmir is a land of immense art talent with a great history of arts and crafts. The artisans in Kashmir perfected the designs of Persian masters in carpets and handicrafts and poetry even. The hand-embroidered Kashmiri shawl is considered a valued possession even today all over the world. And Kashmiri artists have greatly influenced art movements in Indian subcontinent and contributed original philosophies and changed and challenged the perception of thought, aesthetics, performance, and digital curiosity. However, unfortunately, due to the conflict, apart from the infrastructure, Kashmir even lacks the basic breathing space for open artistic expression. We have witnessed immense setbacks to the artists, the art industry, and art education due to decades of turmoil. There has been a lack of attention and action by the government, institutions, universities towards the fields of art in Kashmir. And there's an absence of organizations of substance working towards this point. There's a psychological insecurity towards art as a career option. There is a prevailing lack of awareness about the importance of arts amongst people. From my experiences, the most common idea of art is to make visually pleasing things that I think such a narrow idea of art is dangerous. So to address all these issues, Kashmir Art Quest was initially created as a platform for contemporary arts and an alternate breathing space for the artistic geniuses of Kashmir to interact with themselves and the world. A stage for the free exchange of ideas and the development of self. At Kashmir Art Quest, we try to engage the world of art with the masses in all sectors of educational, political, technological, industrial, business, and corporate work. It was me and my friend, and we started with the idea of organizing a group show in Srinagar during our vacations. As I said, I was in Mumbai at the time, and we started in August 2009. And while working on the project, we came up with ways to connect more artists, and eventually the show turned out to be a huge success, exhibiting over 200 works by 40 artists, 9 years artists. This has now become an annual phenomenon. Last year we worked with more than 50 artists. We produced over 350 works, and thousands of people who came to the event over a period of 5 days. We have been involved in other projects like international art exchange programs, research-based projects, workshops, training sessions, talks, film screening events, and other projects of diverse nature where artists work collaboratively with writers, journalists, architects, engineers, and people in other fields. Is my time up?
Yeah. But you can.
Okay, should I?
You can join in the discussion and please wrap it. Yeah. Take a minute to wrap up.
Okay, I mean, to put it short, I think I believe, among other things, Kashmir is most importantly suffering from a severe crisis of human resources. We make very poor use of human talents. We need a new case, but we are stuck somewhere else. We are trying to fix a broken model. In a struggle for justice, we do not need reform. We need a revolution. And to conclude, I would conclude with this quote by Benjamin Franklin, in a way that I was introduced to recently at a TED conference. There are three types of people in this world. Those who are immovable, they don't get it, they don't want to get it. There are people who are movable. They can see the need for change and are prepared to listen. And there are people who move, who make things happen. We must encourage more people to move so that we have a movement. If the movement is strong enough, it is a revolution, and that is what we need. Thank you.
On that note, thank you. Our next presenter, and can everybody hear me? Thank you so much, Syed. Thank you so much for your paper. Hopefully we can come back to some of these points you raised in the discussion section.
Sure.
But everybody, you have 10 minutes, so we're going to just show you when your 5 minutes are up, and then finally show you when you have no time left. So our second presenter for today is Malik, who finished his MA in Social Work at Kashmir University, and the title of his talk is Normalization of Militarization and its Consequences for Mental Health in Kashmir.
Well, assalamu alaikum everyone. Well, at the outset, I would like to say that the present paper is a part of my research interest in the area of mental health. And the present study was conducted in order to assess the impact of militarization of the mental health in Kashmir, especially in the post-insurgency period. And the study is driven by curiosity to assess the spike in the magnitude of psychiatric disorders in the current period, as one of the fundamental reasons of suppression of disorders in the insurgency period was the priority attached to the survival instinct, which in turn suppressed the manifestation of psychiatric disorders. The objectives of the present study, they determine the magnitude of disorders among the respondents, association between experiencing and witnessing a traumatic event and manifestation of psychiatric symptoms, and most importantly, to study and interpret the lives of respondents who have been tortured or whose relatives have been killed by Indian forces. Well, as we all know that Kashmir's political conflict has witnessed intermittent periods of violence and human rights violations for the last 23 years, and the ingenious insurgency and counter-insurgency offensive by India has resulted in more than 70,000 killings, around 8,000 forced disappearances, mostly civilians, gross violations of human rights, especially torture and rape, as reported by the human rights organizations. I would like to quote the findings of MSF study which was conducted in 2006, that in the period between 1989 to 2005, people frequently reported traumatic events like crackdowns, risking the security forces, and roundup raids in villages. In the same period, damaged property and burning of houses was concentrated. And the report further states, which supports my argument, that even with a definitive end to violence, it could be expected that a substantial number of people would need support to overcome their problems. Well, for the present study, the screening for psychiatric disorders was carried out by employing MINI, that is MINI International Neuropsychiatric Interview, which is based on Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders Code. And case studies were conducted in order to assess the role of militarization in affecting the daily lives of respondents. And the disorders selected for assessment were major depression, recurrent dyschemia, panic disorder, agoraphobia, OCD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. The findings revealed that 40% of the respondents met criteria for at least one major disorder which was selected. 10% of the respondents qualified for having major depression, 4% for major depression recurrence, 4% for dyschemia, 2% for agoraphobia, while OCD was identified in 4% of the respondents. Post-traumatic symptoms disorder was identified in 4% of the respondents. And the sampling method which was chosen for the present study was X number, and the respondents were chosen from a psychiatric hospital in Gowhar, which is a highly affected district as far as comparative concerned. Well, I have conducted case studies as well, and the conceptualization and self-accounts of individuals subjected to violence, loss of dear ones, and torture, because I believe that individuals who have been subjected to violence and loss of dear ones and torture, the suffering transcends beyond any unitary field of inquiry. And also, whenever the researcher, whenever I am in such kind of situations, it is a belief that there is an impossibility to empathize fully and relate to the victim's ordeal despite being belonging to the same community. I had conducted 6 case studies for the present paper, but there was a deadly and gruesome monotony in all the case studies. And even if one case study is represented, it will represent and symbolize the ordeal of all the victims. I will be presenting one of the case studies which I have chosen for the present paper. Ghulam Jilani, along with his wife and elder son, narrates the gruesome killing of his son, namely Firdaus Ahmed, which was killed in 1997. He was 27 years of age. He was abducted by army personnel during the crackdown in 1997. After the crackdown was over, we went to the army camp to inquire the whereabouts of our son. But army outrightly denied his custody and claimed that they had set him free, recollects Jilani Sahib. Father of the victim, a farmer by profession, vehemently pursued the search for his son, but authorities kept playing a dead end. After some days, sound of heavy gunfire and light artillery firing was heard in and around the area, which appeared to come from forest sites within the locality. On the same day, the family routinely went to the local police station to have an update on their son's whereabouts, where they were informed that the last rites of Firdaus had been performed just some hours earlier, and that the deceased was killed by militants, and that the army had recovered his dead body and only the right way. To ascertain that the limb actually was Firdaus's, police said that it had a mole on one of the toes, which was confirmed by his family. The family was left devastated, and the shock was so intense that the victim's mother has since lost her ability to walk without a physical aid. She is not able to do any household chores. She adds while listening to her husband, "I have been end of for darkness." She adds in Kashmir that the dead body was not handed over to the family. They don't know where he is buried, and this fact unsettles both the parents. I would like to come directly to the discussion of the study, because I would like to mention here that I had written this paper for the publication in a journal, and I am presenting the crux of the paper. And the discussion, I would like to come back to the discussion, that the coercive use of brutal regulatory mechanisms by the Indian state has taken a huge toll on social, psychological, and economic aspects of the society. There has been a huge rise in the prevalence of psychiatric disorders, especially PTSD and depression. A lifetime prevalence of 15.9% PTSD was found in a community-based survey conducted by Dr. Malik et al. This study not only emphasizes the prevalence and presence of mental health disorders from a clinical point of view, but also to document the sufferings of the victims using the multidisciplinary approach to suggest the possible short and long-term interventions for the amelioration of their problems. I will be concluding the presentation of this paper by saying that the root cause of the problem which lies in the Indian state's objective to discipline and assimilate Kashmir into its territory, along with the use of forcing measures aimed at objectives. And the resolution of the problem is a distant cry as it involves more than one stakeholder. And the continuous siege and fear maintained by Indian states with the past legislation like Armed Forces Special Powers Act, Public Safety Act, and Distributed Areas Act acts as a risk factor responsible for the deterioration of mental health of the people. In a situation where researchers are themselves apprehensive of facing the wrath of intelligence or security agencies, the initiation of any professional activity is greatly impeded. But nevertheless, the scope of social work, psychiatric social work, and advocacy for the corroboration of services which go beyond the clinician's room cannot be denied. And the interim measures can be in the form of restructuring and implementing mental health policies, greater awareness for the reduction of stigma, and provision of mental health care services at the doorsteps of people. Well, this is officially the end of this presentation. I have already emailed the paper which might be entering some changes for the purpose of publication. The references and citations have been quoted in the paper, but this was only the facts of the paper which I don't know how I managed to present here because it was written from a publication point of view. So I would like to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to present my paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. Our next presenter is Idrees from the University of Leiden, who will present on petitions, rights, and the moral discourse of community, the events of 1931 in Kashmir and its aftermath.
Hello?
Hello.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. Basically, after 15 minutes to deal with the way we think which are kind of, it basically was an old page, like everything can be done in property. It was about 35 pages, and I've cut it down to around 20 pages, 20 pages. So I'll read as much as I can, and the paper is titled, I think, Petitions, Rights and Communities, the events of 1931 and its aftermath. The events of 1931 in Kashmir were effectively an assertion of the power of the Muslims against the Gowhar state, a state which they incidentally came to see as oppressive, working protective of the interests of the Kashmiri Pandits. This realization is indicative to the emergence of a community which sought to articulate its boundaries not only with reference to the Gowhar state, but also to oppose concerns to Kashmiri Pandits. On the contrary, confronted for the first time with an assertive Muslim population demanding equitable treatment, the Pandits eschewed its adherence to the regional cause of Kashmir for Kashmiris and began to speak increasingly in the language of endangered religious minorities. It led to conditions under which the communities became pitted against each other, resulting in new subjectivities, new versions of themselves and the other, and new histories. However, the tussle between Kashmiri Muslims and Pandits in and after 1931 was more about political and economic repression than religious antagonism. In the present paper, I intend to focus on two petitions, memorials, and other writings by Kashmiri Muslims and Pandits, in an effort to bring out the emerging contestations between the two communities and the evolving relations with the state. These petitions are in themselves a reflection of changes taking place in Kashmir around the 1930s and serve as a convenient answer in the ways that Muslims and Pandit communities interacted with the state and the perception they came to develop of each other. They will also help us identify the economic and social conditions that prompted the two communities to approach their authorities to effect their claims or to redress their grievances, and in doing so, take out who the petitioners were and how they properly connected with those the petition. The petition's role as a completely public offering of expression makes it a very valuable historical text.
Hello, hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a little slow.
Okay. The petition's role as a completely public offering of expression makes it a very valuable historical text. Its publicity compels the petition's language to be heavily embedded in the forms of civility, and thus almost completely lacking in candor that previously might be. That is, in a sense, these sources can be read as perfectly biased historical documents, understandable only within the realm of their temporal and social context. Every petition is an interaction of the identity of the petitioner and the authority being petitioned. The substance of the appeal or claim indicates the relationship between the petitioner and authority that is the pursued. But more fundamentally, petitions not only recognize the appeal to authorities, they are implicit restrictions of the moral world in which particular claims are sensible legitimacy. Frequently, petitioners seek inclusion of themselves or marks of others in existing moral worlds. But petition can also be the opportunity for the presentation of a transcendental moral order in which communities and authorities shift into new relations and take on new form. In their petitions, the Kashmiri Pandits usually address the Dogra state by harking back to a past in the course of claiming what they believe to be theirs in the contemporary present. The Muslims, on the other hand, took recourse to a moral discourse in order to justify their specific claim. A discourse which is emerging in a dialectical interaction with the state and not completely embedded or emerging from within the community. Yet the construction of Muslim and Pandit identities were not new to the process. The narrative of events in post-1951 Kashmir also highlights the process by the participants moved from the localized, related community to broader but constructed on sheer ideological basis. This at times has bridge gaps between the upper sections of the Muslim community with the lower one, and perhaps can explain collective action. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello? Yeah. Secondly, the crucial involvement of the state in the furtherance of rights for the Muslim community has to be equally considered. Often the state is depicted merely as a formidable autonomous force, interesting itself on subordinate groups. Resistance is formulated only after the state is already constituted and begins to threaten local communities. But it needs to be suggested that the state and its agenda are often themselves shaped alters by rather ordinary forms of trust. The Dogra state, while being pressurized by the colonial Indian government, was also trying to maintain its inner legitimacy and was thus forced to take on a course of neutrality, and hence give consideration to the claims of the Muslim community as they elaborate. By 1920, the shift from being an oppressed to being an under-recognized community was becoming more conspicuous in the emerging Muslim consciousness that sought to move beyond the circumscribed secure interaction with the state, an interaction that had hitherto confined itself to state vis-a-vis the state, mostly as a question of religious space. By also presenting Lord Leiden, the Viceroy's memorial on his visit to Kashmir in 1974, the Muslim leadership had shown its distress in the Dogra state in redressing its grievances. The memorial had expressed a widening in the demands of the Muslims and was no longer limited to restoration of religious spaces, but increasingly focused on economic and educational issues. It has also demanded that an elected legislative assembly, which would also work as a constitutional assembly for the drafting of a constitution for the state, be set up immediately. The notion of being an under-recognized community, which in turn constructed itself in comparison with a community which was allegedly seen as over-recognized, meant that the confrontation was no longer between the Muslim community and the state. The Muslim leadership identified Kashmiri Pandits as the other communities, which in contradistinction to theirs, were protected minorities that not only had access to scholarship and grants for education, but was more than adequately represented in the government service. Even before the events of 1931, the Muhammadians of Kashmir state had been taking an increasing interest in securing a large share of posts in the Kashmir government and were campaigning for a better treatment for themselves. There had recently been, as it observed, much discussion among the Muhammadans about their grievances and the comparatively small Hindu community of Kashmir, because the result of mistaken forces in many years standing has been allowed to monopolize most of the appointments in the state. I think I'll skip some portions. I am skipping a couple of paragraphs. The Kashmiri Pandits who had earlier withstood a challenge from the Punjabi officials and had successfully raised the slogan of Kashmir for Kashmiris, but now faced with an even serious rival. although what they had demanded then was not for the benefit of the masses of the Pandits themselves, but having raised education in the name of people, quote unquote, Pandits had tacitly included the interests of Kashmiri Muslims when making regionally based demands. With the Muslims also demanding a share, they were ironically confronted now with the logical extension of their strategy. So there's this subtitle, Minority Majority in the State. The disturbance of 1931 produced a strong reaction in the minds of Pandits. It unnerved them. Although Muslim leadership had been increasingly talking about economic and educational reform, and the Pandits were growing confident in Muslim demands, the events of 13th July were not expected. I guess most people know about 13th July. Most people did not anticipate that a Kashmiri crowd would behave in the way it did, and it was least expected by the residency. The discourses that were generated during this period bore a relation to stereotypes in everyday life. But under these conditions, these stereotypes came to acquire a different quality. In the atmosphere that prevailed after the events of 1931, rumors came down. These people had an image of themselves and the other, displacing the subjectivity of everyday life. The Pandits were gripped by fear that they were losing ground in the states of Muslim majority. And consequently, this feeling gave impetus to the idea of a certain Hindu minority. It was rumored that the government was giving in to Muslim demands for political representation. We also see an increased number of telegrams, letters, and memorials from the Islamic organizations addressed to the Maharaja and the Prime Minister of Kashmir, expressing reservation and resentment to sacrifice Pandit interests to satisfy Muslim demands. Conversely, the Muslims had perpetrated their own set of rumors that 100 good Muslims had been killed by the Hindus and their shops looted. So I'll skip some more portions. Realizing the gravity of the situation and invoking himself to be a just ruler, Maharaja Hari Singh had earlier issued a proclamation trying to convince the Muslim community that the Dogra state had an impartial and secular character, and thus did not believe in discriminating between religious groups. But such proclamations were creating a vocabulary of moral discourse, which the Muslims could invoke to express their grievances and expect justice. The administration of the state, as the Muslim Outlook newspaper observed, is carried in such a flagrantly anti-Muslim spirit that his Muslim subjects were acceding with this. But His Highness is stated to have assured that justice was religion and that all his subjects, whether rich or poor, Hindu or Muslim, were alike and deserving of impartial treatment. So I'll skip some more quotes. Thus we see that the discourse of justice was providing the frame of political negotiation. But did the Maharaja become a symbol of justice, or did his rhetoric of justice provide a political space for negotiation? By accepting the Maharaja's claim to uphold the ideal of justice, the Muslim community could demand the realization of the ideal. It must be admitted that the overall position of the community was no worse in 1941 than it had been at the beginning of Maharaja's reign. Indeed, in some respects, it was arguably better. When the Muslim leadership had presented the Viceroy with a memorial seeking jobs and better education facilities for Muslims in 1984, Maharaja Hari Singh had responded with a severe rejection to the memorial. But in an effort to contain what was turning out to be into a dangerous political trend of outspoken among Kashmiri Muslims now, Hari Singh adopted a policy that attempted to conciliate hostile opinion, even ambiguous. When only one Muslim was selected for the formation of the scholarship section for board in 1987, it was bitterly resented by the Muslim Association, both in Kashmir and Jammu. And there were more scholarships were awarded to the Muslim candidates in 1928 and 29. And the government claimed that scholarships were now equally distributed between the Hindu and Muslim candidates. For Prema Bazaz, who represented the Pandit community during the tumultuous events of 1930s, it appears that the government wanted to do something at this time. And His Highness was anxious to take as many Mohammedans in the public service as possible. It was decided that about 50% vacancies should be reserved. So what I'm trying to basically say that how the state actually also pushed the discourse of Muslim rights inadvertently in their effort to convince the opposition. So I go a bit further. The point to be emphasized is that the emerging discourse of rights in Kashmir in the early 30s was not emerging entirely from within the Muslim community. It was emerging for context is attached to the state and the evolving politics of the time. In other words, one may say that it was super contemporary. Through the 1920s, as the Kashmiri Muslim leadership started talking about the unpredicted condition of its community and petitioned the Maharaja and government of India, the Dogra state for the Jews had to assume a posture of impartiality to secure its position as a legitimate entity of government, and thereby impose a discourse of neutrality on itself, even if it was very naturally new. So what can I do? I don't know. I can sort of. How many minutes do I have?
No minutes at all.
Yeah,
So let me give it up.
Take a minute.
Also okay. I can just read the conclusion then maybe. I can straight away go to the conclusion.
Okay.
The discourse of rights in Kashmir evolved for dialogical process between the communities and the state, besides other important factors. Conversely to this process, the Muslim and Hindu communities constituted themselves as single communities were claiming these rights. The claims seem to be justified either by reference to past in which they were supposed to be existing and thus legitimate, or by invoking a particular moral discourse. Progressively, these claims graduated to the status of minority and constitutional rights, sought by the existing Hindu and Muslim communities, respectively. This may cause an increasing interaction and conflict between the communities and the state, and between the communities themselves as they negotiated political space. The increased interaction and the involvement of the government of India in Kashmir forced the Gowhar to pose as a new entity and to recognize the legitimate claims of different communities. But while it tries to negate the politics of rights and create a political public sphere, it can be increasingly identified as a particular community, in this case the Pandits. But Gowhar, for its part, sought to transcend this close association and represent itself as a protector of all the communities and not just the communities. That's it. I've skipped around 10 pages. And what can you do? What can one kind of
That is brave. I think that is brave to skip 10 pages.
Actually, thank you so much, Idrees. Can you just give us a second here? I don't think Gowhar has joined us yet, so I'm going to invite her again. Just give us a second here.
Yeah.
If she can't join us, then somebody will read her paper, parts of the paper. Just give us a minute. Sorry. Hold on. Let me do it again. Yes. Can you give me the
W-O-W,
yes?
H-A-R-Y-A-C-O-O-D
Oh, double O. At
Gmail.
that's a different one. Hi, Gowhar. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? No? Gowhar? Gowhar, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Have you muted the voice?
Can you say something? Yeah, but we can't hear you. That was
No,
I
that's
undid
a
that.
no.
No, I undid that, so it should be good. This is happening earlier.
Oh.
Can you say something?
She's hearing you.
Yeah, she is. Maybe somebody can read it and she can just go online because we don't want to miss anything.
Maybe she can. Yeah.
Oh, hello? Hello?
Oh.
It's only from her end, really.
There's something wrong with her. But yeah, I'm not sure. Is she hearing you?
Yeah, she's hearing me.
Okay, then it's their microphone or something like that.
I'm not sure if she can you see it?
I can see Yacob sir in the background. Sorry for the interruption, but
Oh, that's fine. That's what this space is for. Critical space for that. Critical camaraderie. Critical camaraderie.
how are you, sir? No, can't hear you.
I don't think that's our Long time. Okay, I know my Gowhar without ever having met them.
Can we just
Yeah, we'll read the introduction.
can you say, I don't know, can you not see my messages? Oh, I've been just writing away. Oh, yeah. I thought I heard her.
You can ask her to shake her head up and down or no.
Oh, she can hear.
Oh, yeah, so you can hear us. So what we're going to do is read parts of your paper while you show the clips. Is that good?
The photograph.
The photographs, not the clips.
Hold them in front of the camera.
If you can just put that in front of the camera.
You might not have hard copies.
No, but I thought that was good. Can you say something?
No.
Alright, Haley is going to be reading that's my account. Haley will be reading your introduction. And in the meantime, you can show us some pictures from your end. Is that good? Because I've already sent you
She pulls it up on her computer, she can show it.
Yeah, but then
she's using, yeah.
No, she can show her screen.
Yeah, she can share the screen. That's what I'm doing right now. But she can't anyway. So you can share your screen on Google Hangouts so we can actually see the pictures. It might be hard for us to show them from here.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
But she might not.
Know how to.
This is that button below the chat. The one with the screen and the arrow. Yeah.
Yeah, that one, right? The screen share. There's a screen share option with an arrow that's pointing to the right. On your left hand side, if you see, there's a range of options. One of the icons is an arrow pointing towards the right. So if you click on that, BC and Idrees, you need to stop eating. Okay, can you share the screen, please?
No, we have to be more professional.
Like the anti-lecturer. Can you? I'm not getting any responses.
So why don't you show the video on the paper and she can go back to it?
They're on the computer, right? So you can toggle the screen. Should one that screen. I could go ahead and start. It takes minutes to get there.
I don't have her.
You have a paper, right? So let me pull up her visuals. Okay.
Sorry.
So everyone see my email.
Okay. Okay, I'll start reading the paper on behalf of Gowhar while we're finding the images to present on the screen. The title of the paper is Everyday State Violence, Changing Landscape and the Texture of Space. Let me begin with the obvious. The spaces in Kashmir are perpetually transformed in a sequence of checkposts, barricades, bunkers, and barbed wire. This creates an interlocking surface, which I call small networks of power. The patterns in which these small networks dot the landscape not only alter the spaces, but facilitate military intervention into everyday realms beyond legal provision. The patterns in which the changes are wrought on landscape, which produce spaces for human utility, are symptomatic of the alteration in a particular manner, which produce a network of spatial ensnares inextricably linked with state intervention. Such that the spaces, streets, buildings, tourist resorts, bridges, cafes, roads, shopping complexes, parking areas, are not only cohabited by the military apparatus and civilians, but fragmented in a way that inflicts violence on everyday lives of the people. When the barrier is completed and the temporary permanent security measures are implemented, an alien space is produced within a space, which I call non-spaces. A new map of power, military, is drawn, which exercises control over both the changes in the landscape as well as the people. People's civilian participation in the inhabited environment and their relationship with the spaces in everyday exchange is interrupted and mediated through high surveillance and control. The juxtaposing of objects such as barbed wire, sandbag bunkers, barricades within the space has been held in attempt to interpret the changes in the landscape as an aggressive and most virulent form of violence perpetrated by the Indian state. The day-to-day negotiations with the changing landscape, the spaces, locations, pathways, streets, through state interventions, non-spaces, bunkers, barricades, and barbed wire, constantly challenge the notions of stability, familiarity, and ease for people. The conversion of spaces into such small networks of power, their military installations, mutilate the memory of landscape on the one hand, and on the other hand attempt to exceedingly naturalize and neutralize this transition of everyday realm as an expression and extension of state violence. Landscape is not a passive and static medium in which we live and move and have our being. Landscape signifies and symbolizes power relations and even becomes an agent of power. It plays a pivotal role in the making of history and the complex networks of political, social, and cultural identities. I have no intention here of speaking in general about landscape or the history of landscape. This paper aims to raise certain issues to spell out the very exhaustion of the everyday realm, which have become critical intersections to the politics of enforced silence, erasures, naturalizing incessant intervention of the Indian state in a seamless manner. This focus on not-so-obvious processes can understandably make apparent ways in which the state repression sustains and can provide a version of landscape not only as a site of social encounters, but also as a field of politics and power, and a symbolic and material realm of everyday experience, whether urban or rural. By reinforcing facts already stated, what this paper further does is that it brings to focus both the erasures and interventions by the state in everyday practices of people as a means of disciplining and exercising power. My intent is to begin with the visuals and interpret these to allow me to convey, through the visuals, the photographs, what has become more or less diluted in the everyday, mundane rush of object experience. More specifically, this pervasive mode of power, military domination, has changed not only personal experience, but also the historical experience of one's relationship to the past and the present. In other words, in order to capture much nuanced insight of what is really at stake, that is, how people are less free to choose and act, it is important to push the everyday realm and bring to light the nature of violence perpetuated. With a layered history of deceit, violently abrogated treaties, Kashmir continues to be an issue of grave concern. By layered history, I mean continuous disruption of people's movements by deploying political, cultural, and legal strategies and military governance by the Indian state to augment control over Kashmir and claim Kashmir to be an integral part of India. On the other hand, Pakistan's dubious position vis-à-vis Kashmir conflict and their claim on Kashmir to be the jugular vein have suspended, erased Kashmir and the people from their own historical moments to decide for themselves. The indeterminate negotiations over multiple issues between India and Pakistan have completely evaded and diluted the prime issue of Kashmir conflict. Since 1947, politically, Kashmir issue has primarily been pinned as a conflict between the two newly created nation-states of India and Pakistan in South Asia, beginning with the standstill agreement, which eventually became a bitter military struggle, each strengthening the claims of control on Jammu and Kashmir. The 1949 ceasefire line, later the LOC militarily enforced division, changed the nature of Jammu and Kashmir. While India continues to claim all of Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan rejects the accession of Kashmir to India in 1947 as fraudulent. Apart from demoting the question of Kashmir conflict from international to bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, Indian government, while entering into negotiations with the state governments, further eroded the main issue. It has thus become crucial to engage with the question of violence and control over excessively perpetuated by operating in and through space militarily, which is a realm of everyday lives and social interaction. So at this point in the paper, Gowhar presents a series of visuals from Kashmir in order to analyze and explicate them in certain ways. These have been cycling through, right, the screen as we've been proceeding. Kashmir's landscape has been and continues to be interpolated with meaning, such as picturesque, paradise on earth, beautiful, pastoral. However, what is striking about the exoticization of the land is the smooth transition and suppression of violence perpetrated through changing landscapes. Kashmir has most often been souvenired and eulogized as a hospitable and beautiful place. both having captured people's imaginations and promoted a taste for exotic scenery, thus represented as picturesque. How is that state represented? The first two visuals, 1 and 2, one is on the screen now, are not put in a comparative frame here, nor are they placed to evoke contrast of any kind. However, looking at the two figures, it becomes crucial to see A, what kind of space is assigned a normative value, and B, how is the representation of a landscape as an altered memory sustained only through picturesque, both beyond the coordinates of time and the political movement of people. Figure 1 vividly manifests the tension while looking at the visual and seeing in real time and space. What relationship do the human figures exhibit with this space, which is predominantly buoyed up by the assistance booth, where police assistance is itself arrested in the barbed wire and snare, the booth and the surrounding both choke? Arguably, the human figures in the visual inverse the function of tourist assistance. This relation is inversed not only in terms of the opposite direction that the visitors choose to move in, but succumbing to indifference. The impossibility to access the booth and the dysfunctionality of mandatory services further intensify the tension between the booth and the human figures in the visual. The fascination for romantic and picturesque is symptomatic of fixed gaze. As one shifts the focus to figure 2, now on the screen, the viewer seeks to join her with the historically represented landscape as part tourism promotion and part fascination of the exotic. Imagined now becomes real. The two dominant sets of representations, that is, imagined exotic and advertised, overlap here. This overlapping allows the space in figure 2 to be viewed entirely as the real and authentic space. The spectators, tourists, perform their roles in a context they themselves authorize and endorse, in which the man is more likely to be entertained according to the expectations and the exchange value of money. I'll skip ahead here to the conclusion to make it through final remarks. There are more questions than answers. What kind of a spatial labyrinth has evolved? How to translate the distance between the individuals and the non-spaces? Have the sites already become landmarks? What kind of a vocabulary is becoming part of the language? Is this mapping producing a new order of space? How does one interpret the experiences and responses of people in the everyday when the fundamental relationship to the space is violated? Thank you.
Can you still hear us?
Well, she can hear us because both the speaker and the microphone. She couldn't hear anything.
Can you guys hear us?
I can hear you. Yes.
Did you guys hear Haley? Did you guys hear Gowhar's paper?
Yes, we did. I did. Yes, we did.
Okay, we're good. Thanks.
It's 2:15 and we're scheduled to end at 2:15. Do you want to take 5 minutes to discussion or do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're opening up our first panel for discussion. So if there are any questions, please raise them now, so we can actually have a vibrant discussion about some of the questions that were raised.
There's an echo happening again.
No. Before you have to use it.
Yeah, we'll reduce the volume on the still echo. Is it still echoing?
No, it won't.
It won't echo if it's
No,
all in the same.
no, it won't echo.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so can we have some questions, please, from the presenters and the rest of us? Who might have a question? Go ahead, please. Yeah. Who might have a question? And I'm turning it.
So, Mujtaba, this question is for you, and anyone else who would like to respond to that, as well as Gowhar with the space. The question is about Zubin Mehta's concert. He had this very unique, occupation move to normalize the situation in Kashmir, and you've been working on issues of creativity and Kashmiri art. What was the response from your artists, your entrepreneurial arts group? Did you have a concerted effort? Did you think about it? Did you write any letter? Or, for the future maybe should we be planning that whenever there is such a move to normalize occupation, what should our indigenous, local Kashmiri artists, how should we respond?
There was a bit of interruption, but just to make it clear, what you are saying is, in context of the Zubin Mehta controversy, the concert controversy, what would have been the appropriate response? Is that what you are asking?
No, I mean, how did you respond? Because you have that Art Quest group that is, on the ground in Kashmir. What was your reaction of that entrepreneurial group of artists?
Okay. Now, firstly, when the concert was happening in Kashmir, I was in London at that time, and so I was not present on ground to really be a part of that action. But our group's response was basically to join. Do you know about the parallel event which is happening, Hakikatan?
Yes, absolutely. We helped organize it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So my artist, not my artist, like the idea of our group was to just join them and support them in whatever way we could.
Fantastic, thank you.
I think Deepti had a question about space, but of course Gowhar can't respond. She can respond in writing, and I think she has. Can you hear out there?
Yeah.
Hold on.
So I was really, I'm kind of interested. I really like this idea, what you're saying about.
Hold on.
Okay. So this question is for Mujtaba. Do you hear it? So, well, I totally empathize with this idea of victimization, and like whenever a Kashmiri speaks up, no matter what, it's kind of like framed within that paradigm of a victim. And not just Kashmiris, but anyone who is oppressed or is living under occupation or something that is similar. So you also mentioned that we have to develop some alternate models of education. I'm kind of wondering, how do you see that happening within the kind of hegemonic, oppressive regime that Kashmir is under right now? So how do you see that emerging? Do you have a model? Do you kind of think? Yeah.
I think that part covered in the post and how I think is a bit right. See, as an institution, I think I did talk about this alternate education model, and a lot of things going on.
Can you speak now? Maybe it's better now. Yeah, speak now.
Yeah, yeah, it's not good. Yeah. So as I was saying that, hello?
You should also keep his volume low. He needs to turn his volume down.
Turn your volume low. So turn your volume down a little bit so there's less of an echo. Thank you.
I was saying that as an institution, Kashmir Art Quest, we are at this stage, we are not necessarily, we do not want to build a university or sort of start a new school and that kind of thing. But our idea is to basically create an independent social space where everybody can, intellectuals, academics, students, professionals can come together and work on projects, on solutions, and how to, on strategies, how to implement them practically. Having conferences like these in Kashmir. Our aim is not to be entrepreneurs, but to harness the potential of local people and then enable social entrepreneurs. Our idea is, as I said, to bring together people, allow them to work more collaboratively, and we try and create resources. For example, we have been doing different projects and exhibitions and shows and trying to support our organization. But what we are planning now to do is to establish a research institution in Kashmir, a creative institution. It should have a gallery, it should have a library, for example. How many public libraries do we have in Kashmir? And there is an enormous wealth of books and literature all around the world. How do we access this? Why do we need Kashmir? So our idea right now is what we are working on right now is the establishment of this sort of interdisciplinary research center, cultural center, which would be an open access space for everybody to come and work on these projects. What we are doing is we are trying to empower other people to make things happen. As I said, there are people who know what to do, who may come up with solutions, but they may not necessarily have the resources or infrastructure to do that. So what we try to do is we try to enable such people and such spaces to exist, so that there is a dialogue moving through, there is a sort of collaboration happening. Like in my experiences, we did a project with an artist and an architect, and we had met architects separately and we had met the artists separately. What we did was we just got them together, and now they are doing their own projects on the sustainable models and Kashmir, how to build from dirt in Kashmir and memory communities that we want. So yeah, that's I hope that, I mean, it's a bit around it, but I hope that makes it a bit clearer.
Thank you. Actually, I have two questions. One for Salem and the other one for Syed. But I'll go with Salem first because Syed has been talking for a while. So Salem, I really enjoyed your case study. I just wish we'd gotten to hear more about the people that you were talking about in a more extended way, but hopefully the paper will allow us to do that. But I was just wondering if you were able to focus on certain cultural categories other than the Ph.D. and the ones that are basically coming from the outside. Is there anything, is there a vocabulary that people use on a day-to-day basis to speak about trauma, to speak about depression, in ways that actually captures the nuance, the cultural and the historic nuance of madness or trauma or depression or frustration and so on and so forth? Because I think that would really enrich the case study even more.
The sufferings the victims have gone through extends anyone to different body, and psychiatry, as far as psychiatry is involved, is basically a clinical point of view and clinical methodology, and how people express the victimization and suffering. It's actually the mostly people don't people use so much as either it is the somatization of the suffering, the psychiatric problem, like people express it as the deterioration of physical health, the effects of suffering as the deterioration of physical health, which actually is not the deterioration of physical health, which actually is the effect of mental health of the people. But and I would like to say that there is not much research, as far as I know, has been conducted on alleviating the sufferings of people beyond the psychiatric and beyond the clinical point of view. And it's my endeavor to actually assess and document the sufferings as far as the cultural expression and the local expression are concerned.
Thank you, Salim. I actually have a follow-up question on your answer, if I may.
On Gowhar Kanth or Salim?
Salim.
Sorry.
Hi, Salim. So I also really enjoyed your paper, and one of the things that, it's related to Mona's question, but one of the things that really struck me while listening to it was I was working in Indian Kashmir in the valley during the time period that you were citing in your case study, and doing some work with doctors. And one of the things that was clear to me at that time was that it was nearly impossible for people to tell these stories without getting caught in the kind of a narrative abyss of really further violence, where by merely telling the stories they were potentially open to new forms of violence, or acknowledging the fact that it was the Indian state, for example, as opposed to the militants that at whose hands they'd experienced this kind of violence. And one of the things I was wondering while I was listening to you is whether this highly scientific language that has a kind of global circulation behind it is allowing for a recognition of the impact on people's lives, and at the same time kind of creating a space for talking about this that maybe doesn't carry the same kind of political threat. Or whether people like you who are documenting these and acknowledging the source of people's experiences are finding that is also in and of itself something that's very dangerous still to do and to talk about. So I guess I was wondering about the political implications of this new medicalized language for the experience of violence and its aftermath.
Very rightly said, in that it's very difficult even to make the victims reveal the case study as witnessing the political implications of the revelations. But one of the objectives of this present study were twofold. One was to assess the magnitude of psychiatric disorders in this period, in this that is post-insurgency period, that is which has been because after 2004 there has been a decrease in the traumatic events, and it was a curiosity to prove the belief that there is a spike in the magnitude of psychiatric disorders, because what I say and what I believe is that the normalization of militarization is that the normalization of situation will be the normalization of militarization will lead into more prevalence of psychiatric disorders, because it will lead to the manifestation of psychiatric disorders. And as I have mentioned in the paper also, that it is very difficult. For example, I had to conduct a study. I told my respondents from the Sub-District Hospital of Bhopal, and I had to get the official permission for that. And it was very difficult. So, and as I mentioned in the paper also that the researchers are themselves very apprehensive about apprehensive of facing the wrath of the intelligence and security agencies. But what the psychiatric language and the scientific language which I have used, it allows you to at least interact with the person, because it carries the clinical kind of field which in turn leads us to document the case study of the victims of the violence.
I just had a little thing that I wanted to add to your study. Am I allowed? So what I wanted to say is that I work on enforcement cases, and my work is with hospitals here. And I totally see that this medicalization of the health disorder, the psychiatric problems that they're having, they actually use the language to kind of empower themselves and make it very viable and credible what they're having. At the same time, just to present what it is, and also be politically viable at the same time. And they are talking about Azadi and Indian occupation ending while they're talking about the tension. That's what they call it. They call it tension. And tension is everything, and medication is tension. So I do talk about that in my work, which I'm currently working on.
Great. Haley actually had a question, and so did I, but maybe we can follow it up later. If you guys want to still keep hanging out with us through the night. But we do have to start our next panel. Oh, sorry. The dictatorial regime of an occupation thing. So can we take a quick break? And maybe you guys can take a quick break too, so we return in, let's say, 5 minutes? Oh,
You're already like 10 minutes.
how about a 2-minute break? Can you write it?
Once you can do it, then back.
Let's take a 2-minute break.
We haven't had a chance to welcome our guests here in the room.
I know.
I can, is that uphill speaking? Yeah, that's okay. Then maybe I can try reading my own paper. If the sound out is still not clear, then maybe more nice will be
Can you say something, Akhil?
Yeah, so I don't know if you can hear me. If you can, then it's great. I can read my own paper. Otherwise, maybe you guys will